US has joined the war against Iran, and President Donald Trump has announced that the US military carried out attacks on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. Now let's take a look at the latest developments. Iran's armed forces said that they targeted multiple sites in Israel, including Ben Gurion Airport, after US attacks on key nuclear sites. At least 23 people were injured after waves of Iranian missiles targeted Israel. Several buildings were heavily damaged in the Ramat Aviv area in Tel Aviv, with holes torn in the apartment blocks. Now in Haifa, public square in a residential area of Haifa was left strewn with rubble, and its surrounding shops and homes have been heavily damaged. 2 waves of missiles were launched at Israel from Iran. Meanwhile, sirens rang across the country, with air defenses activated shortly afterwards, causing loud explosions heard in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Now, President Donald Trump addressed the nation from the White House after the US military struck 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including the crucial underground uranium enrichment facility at Fordo. Now, Trump said that the objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat. Calling the strikes a complete success, Trump claimed that the sites were totally obliterated.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps.
Multiple reports claimed that B-2 bombers, which carried the so-called bunker buster bombs, were used in the attack. Now, Trump reportedly told Fox News that US dropped 6 bunker buster bombs in the strikes on Fordo. It also reported that US used 20 Tomahawk missiles on other Iranian nuclear sites. And talking to Reuters, Trump claimed that the strikes were an amazing success. Iranian media reports confirmed that part of the Fordo facility, as well as the Isfahan and Natanz nuclear sites, were attacked. However, the state broadcaster IRIB claimed that the sites, along with their enriched uranium stockpiles, were evacuated beforehand. Top Iranian officials claimed that Fordo did not suffer any major damage due to American strikes. Israel has closed its airspace after the US attack on Iranian facilities. The IDF's Home Front Command has also updated its civilian guidelines, announcing that all schools across the country are being closed. All gatherings have been banned and only essential businesses are allowed to operate. A White House official said that US had given Israel a heads up before conducting the strikes. The official also said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to President Trump after the strikes. And now for more details, joining us live from Wicklow, Ireland on the broadcast is Scott Lucas. He's a professor of international politics at Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, Professor Lucas.
Thank you.
So after striking Iran, now Trump's warning was very blunt that any Iranian retaliation will be met with overwhelming force. But Iran isn't backing down. It's already struck Israel, and it's important to note here that the scale and sophistication of these attacks are also far beyond anything we've seen from its proxies like Hamas. And now, having said that, Professor Lucas, let's talk about how Iran can respond to this. Iran has options which can range from direct strikes on the US forces to targeting naval assets in the Persian Gulf or even mobilizing its proxies. And if that chain reaction begins, we're no longer talking about limited strikes anymore. Now, according to you, just how far can it spiral?
Well, I think immediately you have seen the Iranian response, which is to continue the missile attacks on Israel. At least 86 people injured this morning in Israel. Most of those are minor injuries, but we have seen the effect of those missiles that have destroyed residential buildings. Now, Iran, I think, can continue to do that, albeit with dwindling missile stocks. The issue for it is, does it attack U.S. personnel? Now, it could, for example, because there are up to 40,000 American personnel in the region, within reach of drones and missiles. It could directly attack, or it could use the Trumpists. We know that there's a deep split, as you mentioned, between those who favor military action and those who oppose any military intervention, except maybe against China. We had seen that with some heated exchanges in the past few days, and indeed Trump's own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who thought that these strikes were not necessary. Here's the big question. I think if this is a one-off, if this is a special U.S. strike on these nuclear facilities to demonstrate American power, then I think Trump will be okay. There won't be this serious split. But if he continues the strikes, and if he expands them beyond the nuclear facilities, then I think that wing of the Trumpists who are very concerned about military intervention, they will get louder. So, for how long does Donald Trump do this? For how long does he drop the bombs? That's the key question.
Absolutely, Professor, and we'll have to wait and see what the answer to that is. But meanwhile, some of Trump's political allies, while they have applauded the strikes, even the critics within the conservative fold fear that another endless war is going to fracture his support base. Now, according to you, does this play to Trump's image as a peacemaker, or is he walking into a trap that could split his support base at this time?
Look, there are many people in America who, whatever Donald Trump does, whatever falsehood he tells, however he presents himself, they'll support that. But they are a minority. So you do raise that question, not just about those Trumpists who think, look, we don't want to get embroiled in this war. We certainly don't want U.S. troops on the ground. We're not even sure we want these U.S. planes in the air. But then you have people who voted for Trump last year who are not Trumpists. They voted for him about other issues, about the economy, about immigration. Carrying out a war in Iran does not replace those issues. So can Trump get away with that? Can he, get over the concerns, especially about the economy, just by saying, I'm the tough guy, especially when he says at the same time, I'm the peacemaker? He has a contradiction there. And I don't know how long he can keep that contradiction going.
Right, so and that contradiction has actually come to light in a very interesting turn of events. Now, just a day after recommending Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, Pakistan has now condemned his administration.
Let's go right to Vaughn Hilliard. He is at the White House this evening. Vaughn, what else have we learned?
The president just returned from his New Jersey golf course just about 2 hours ago. The Israeli airstrikes into Iran territory. Now, the president himself had suggested that they would have 2 weeks max, but notably did not rule out a more immediate strike. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu had asserted that Israel had the capacities and the ability to take out the nuclear facilities. And when I asked the president very specifically about the Israeli Prime Minister's claim, he pushed back and undercut that assessment, saying that the U.S. was the only one that had the bombing capabilities to strike, particularly the Fordow nuclear site, which there are activities half a mile underneath the ground. It is not clear at this point in time whether B-2 bombers were used in this instance to take out the Fordow nuclear site, so I don't want to jump ahead of what we know here at this time. But for the president, this is a striking moment, attacking a Middle East country that the president had sought for the better part of the last 2 months to negotiate with. But clearly the president making the decision to go forward with these strikes despite Iranian threats that they would respond in kind by attacking U.S. military installations. There are a lot of outstanding questions here about where Iran goes from this moment, but the United States standing in solidarity with Israel, who 1 week ago began that attack with their initial airstrikes into Iran. There are a lot of outstanding questions, Jose, here at this hour, but the U.S. taking a significant step. And I will note that I had the chance to ask the president yesterday very specifically how this moment was different than the decision of a previous Republican administration more than 20 years ago to strike over questionable intelligence about weapons of mass destruction. And he said that he knew that they were building a nuclear weapon. That is in contrast to the assessment of his own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Yesterday, in an interview with our Andrea Mitchell, the Iranian foreign minister exclusively told her that they are using uranium for peaceful purposes. Now, the question here that you just alluded to was Tulsi Gabbard. Again, Donald Trump, the president's handpicked director of national intelligence, standing by their assessment that they have no intel that an actual nuclear weapon was being developed. Now, there are questions of whether that would take weeks, months, potentially a year to actually build that weapon. But the Iranian foreign minister making it clear to our colleague Andrea Mitchell that they had no intent to build a weapon. Of course, this is a long-standing back and forth here between the United States and Iran. It was 10 years ago that under the Obama administration, an initial nuclear agreement was struck between
जो आप मनाज़र देख रहे हैं, ये ईरान ने इसराइल पर मिसाइल्स फायर किए हैं। इसराइल ने पहले ईरान पर हमले किए और कई जगहों को निशाना बनाया। फिर इसके जवाब में ईरान ने 300 से ज़्यादा मिसाइल दागे हैं, जिसकी वजह से इसराइल में कई जगहों पर बहुत बड़े पैमाने पर नुकसानात हुए हैं। ईरान ने साफ अल्फाज में अमेरिका और इसराइल से बोल दिया है कि ईरान अब बहुत बड़ा सरप्राइज़ देने जा रहा है, जो इसराइल क़यामत तक याद रखेगा। इसराइल के पीछे अमेरिका, यूरोपीय यूनियन खड़े हैं, जबकि ईरान के साथ पाकिस्तान, चीन, रूस और इस्लामी ममालिक खड़े हैं। देखते हैं इस लड़ाई में क्या होता है और किसकी जीत और किसकी हार होती है।